And we're back with some more oxygen not included. And today we're doing a quick tutorial on Radbolts and all of the things that they go into. We're not going to be covering nuclear reactors today, it'll be too complicated and make this video too long, but today we're just going to cover how you generate those rads, how you get them to turn into Radbolts, and what machines you can put them into and what those machines can do for you. First thing we need to cover is, how are you going to get your hands on the Radbolt generator? And simple, research. You're going to want to go down the Supercomputer Lab in Advanced Research, then Notifications, and then straight down here to Material Research Science. That will get you your hands on your Radbolt generator and your Material Study Science terminal, which is what you're mainly going to be using these for early on. Now, your first and easiest source of rads is going to be Wheezeworts. If you're doing a default start, you'll definitely have Wheezeworts on your home starting asteroid, and these things generate about 37 rads. And what you want to do is position this Radbolt generator where this green part here, this is where the rads are absorbed. You want to position that in the most radiated part. In this case, it's in that tile. You can see all the rest of the tiles are slightly lower. They're all coming at 30. This one comes in at 37. And you can see down here, it's slowly generating Radbolts at a rate of, if we check down the status here, 36 per cycle. That's what those rads mean. So if someone is standing there, a duplicate is standing there, anything that's standing there will be absorbing 36 rads per cycle. Now, before we get into what you're going to use these for and how you shoot them about the place, this is not a lot of rads. We need more. You need a fair bit more if you want to actually run anything substantial. So down here we have 3 of them organized in a little pyramid formation, and you end up with 160 rads in here. Oh, I should point out, these things, this Radbolt generator, it eats about 480 watts per cycle, or 480 watts. That's how much power it draws. So yeah, you're going to want to not run a lot of these early on. That's an awful lot of power draw for early on in the game, and you're probably going to be running on coal. So running multiple ones of these, you can do it, but it's generally not advised because you're going to eat through your power supply. Anyway, 106 rads you can get about there, so that means you can stick one of these in there and use it to power your material science lab. However, it doesn't matter what you make it out of. For example, these things are made of dirt tiles, these ones over here are made of clay, and I believe these last ones are made of copper ore. Doesn't matter what you make it out of, you'll always end up with 106 in the middle. So don't really worry about using farm tiles or hydroponic farm tiles. It makes no difference. This, though, is probably a little bit more of a responsible way to make them. You can get 153 in this center tile here if you arrange them in this formation, and you can get 189 if you're willing to go just a little bit further. Anyway, let's assume you went with something of a reasonable size. Say this looks pretty good right here. Though, yeah, I'll come back to some things you can do to improve this. By positioning your material study labs this way, what you can do is you can fire bolts diagonally, and any bolts that overflow should not hit your duplicates, unless the duplicate is standing right here on the edge. If they stand right there on the edge, they can get hit, but there's no real way around that. Otherwise, you're going to end up with your Radbolt generator being like this, and it's going to be pointing to the right, and if it overfills this machine, which I'll demonstrate in a minute, it will just keep sailing and hit a duplicate standing here or further along. It's a little annoying. So positioning them diagonally like this saves you so much hassle in getting hit. Now, why do you want to actually fill these material study terminals? Well, these are research labs. As you get further and further along in the research, you're going to find these ones that have this yellow symbol. That is material study science. You need to have a material study lab to make that work, and it runs on not just electricity, but Radbolts. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to fire a quick Radbolt up here. This thing is currently set to 50 rads. This will become more apparent as we fire. And we'll just fire one shot and turn that off. And then you'll see this Radbolt generator here. It's 47. And then as it goes along, it actually degrades. As it travels through every tile, it loses 1 rad. Now, according to the wiki, it doesn't matter what it's traveling through. And as far as I can tell, yeah, water, gas doesn't make a difference. It will just lose 1 per tile. And as you see there, it has now entered this machine, and we've got 45 Radbolts in it. This is sort of suboptimal, though. That means we're going to need to fire, if we fire a second bolt at 50 rads, which is consumed from these contents down here, we'd only end up with 90 in the machine. That's a little bit awkward, because then we're losing 5 rads every shot. So instead what we could do is we could set this to, say, 105 rads. And then when we hit the fire button now, what'll happen is that should fire exactly enough rads to fill that machine precisely with 0 overflow. Now, of course, you are going to have downtime. The reason I've got the second one up here is we're going to imagine that you've got your living areas over here for your dupes. Well, sometimes your dupe is going to go to sleep, and you're usually going to have one dupe who works the study terminal. That would be actually my advice. Only have one who works it anyway, because your science people will usually be pretty quick. Then what happens is they should come to this one first, because it's the closest one to them. Then when that's emptied, they'll come down to this one to run this one. And then once they're both emptied, they'll go away. But that does mean that when they're asleep, maybe this one fills up and a second shot goes off. In which case, what will happen is this. It'll get... Oh, come on, fire. Perfect. It'll get fired, It will hit this, but since there's nothing to absorb, it'll keep going on. Now, this one, of course, will not be quite perfect. We'll end up at 94. Yeah, we lost 6 along the way. But it doesn't mean we don't waste any rads. What you could do if you really wanted to is you could add on an extra 6 rads to this and save a little bit more. It's your choice, but I wouldn't advise you to. By and large, you're going to be doing most of your science here, because you're only going to be able to generate about, 144 rads per cycle. That's not an awful lot. You're going to burn through your supplies in no time. In fact, let's just fire these off and dispose of them. I can also show you one other thing. What I like to do is I like to place a Radbolt reflector at the top. That way, if there is any overflow, it gets fired back down here. This stuff can generate nuclear waste when it detonates. It also gives off a fair bit of rads. It's a good idea just to fire it somewhere where it's not going to cause you any problems. Now, as that generates down, it should get rid of all that stuff. 1 second, we'll speed that up. That actually kind of looks cool. Alright, all the rads are gone. You can see that this is slowly working up rads. And by the end of the cycle, we'll have 145. It's not a lot. So what you can do, though, is you can use this timer sensor. This timer sensor can allow you to schedule the firing of these bolts if you don't want to manually do it yourself. If you manually do it, you can come back every so often, but you'll have a tendency to overfill the labs or do silly things. So what I like to do is just automate it, so I never have to look at it again, and my dupes should be able to pretty much do it whenever they need, or research what they need. Just make sure you keep on top of research with this current method we're going to try. After doing a little bit of math with a calculator on this one, all we've set this to is every 434 seconds, this will activate the timer for 1 second, which would mean this thing will build up to about the right amount of Radbolts. Oh, you know what? Let's reset the timers on both of these. It'll. One thing we can also demonstrate is never ever let these things lose power. The moment they lose power, the rads just bleed out of them really rapidly. We'll just put this on slow speed so you can see. It's on 16 rads, and then 15, 14, 13. It immediately starts to plummet the moment you remove power from them. So make sure you have a backup power supply to them, or make sure your power supply is very rock solid before you start playing around with these. And what we'll do then is we'll hook that up and we'll reset the timer. Now what should happen is by the time this thing has just hit 105 rads, this timer will activate and we'll fire a Radbolt up that direction. In fact, let's skip this time forward a bit. I should empty these material study terminals too. And here we go. Did we get the timing right? I think we're just about spot on. Maybe not. Oh, there we go. Actually, we might want to make that just 1 second longer. 435 should be fine. So what we've done there is we've just made sure that this basically spits out just as many Radbolts as it gets in. And it will do so without us ever having to look, and it should do so in a way that doesn't endanger the lives of any duplicants. However, do be aware, you're not leaving yourself any reserves here, but normally when it comes to science, so long as you just keep queuing up more and more science as you go, it should be fine. And your duplicants don't, get dragged off to do other things. As long as you get your priorities sorted, let's say. Otherwise, what you can do is just manually fill the science labs when you need them. 100 Radbolts is equal to 10 science, I believe. So, say something like this. Yeah, that's going to take about... over here. Say this one here. That's going to take about 200 rads to completely calculate. So 2 full loads in the science lab should allow you to knock all of that out. And some of them are actually quite cheap. Let me double check. Yeah, most of them in this level are about 20. They only cost about 20 points. And the ones above here cost about 30. And then the later ones cost 250. And you're maxing it at about 400. So you'll definitely need very few of them to get some key techs early on. Like say, steam turbines and solar. You're definitely going to need material science for that, which is probably the main reason you're probably going to want to get into Wheezeworts and Radbolts and all that, is so you can knock this out pretty early. Steam turbines are pretty much the gatekeeper to mid-game. And this is probably what will do you early on. There is also the option of going to space to get your rads. Space naturally generates 25 rads from this... 18 rads. Great. I think they've changed this now. They've changed a few things just to cover them. Yeah, it turns out the amount of light you get from space is also affected. We'll need to get to midday, but basically you won't be getting the full 380 watts out of solar panels you're used to. Planets now have different amounts of light they generate, and it would appear different amounts of rads. So if we go up here to the top of this planet, also 18 rads? God, that is terrible. And this is in the vacuum of space. They really have changed things. And over here, 21 rads. So this planet... yeah, slightly more radiated. But yes, if you're desperate, you can get at least some basic radiation out of space, though do be aware, your Radbolt generators do generate heat. So if we look at this one here, this is generating 5 kilodTUs of heat. If you keep them in space in a vacuum, they will eventually melt. They don't actually have an overheat temperature yet, and their melting point is determined by what you make them out of. So if you make them out of obsidian, it'll melt at like 1600 or 18 or 2800 degrees, something crazy. Make them out of obsidian if you're going to be using them for high temperature requirements. But this should be all you basically need it for early on. It's not until you start getting into later game that things get weird. Now, another way to generate rads, and lots of them, shine bugs. Shine bugs also give off radiation. In fact, they give off quite a bit of radiation, but it's hard to really corral them in unless you want to go with the shine bug reactor variant. Now, all this requires is you're going to need some phosphorite to feed them with. Then you're going to need a rancher, and what we've done here is we've made a very simple, very bare bones, very straightforward ranch. And all that happens is all the eggs, the excess eggs get shipped over here, and there is a lot of shine bugs in there. There's about 228 rads worth of shine bugs in there. That took, how many? 45 critters. So what you're doing here is you're taking all the excess eggs. All those excess eggs are shipped over here, and they're trapped inside this tile. You can't see it, but there is a liquid lock right there, or a little blob of liquid. The shine bugs can't get past it. Since that little blob of liquid, though, is not a closed door, this still counts as one entire giant room, so the shine bugs don't get overcrowded. As well as that, these shine bugs, even if they are tame, they will still drop one egg before they die, meaning these will keep reproducing infinitely, and the more eggs you dump in, the better. It's one of those... You can do the same thing with some other critters as well, namely fish. You're just doing the same thing as you do with Pacu, where you keep dumping in all of the excess eggs from your ranch in here, and eventually you just end up with an enormous amount of them. At the same time, what you can do, if you really want to, is you can actually generate solar power from this. You'll see that that generates an enormous amount of light, and if we check here under light save, you can see, yeah, that's 2700 lux. We can run entire solar panels off this. It's kind of crazy. Without going into too much details on the ranch, I'll include the save game file if you want to have a look. I have a whole tutorial on ranching hatches, which is pretty much a very similar feat, except for these ones fly. And we're using unpowered incubators because they're cheap and cost efficient. And in this instance, all the eggs get dumped over here first. If they don't need to go into the incubators, your duplicants can come along and fill this up, and then they get sent over here. Just make sure your duplicants can't access this area. You don't want them trying to pull the eggs out of there. You'll end up in an infinite rooting loop. But more importantly, they'll get heavily, heavily radiated, and, you know, that would be bad. Radiation can actually kill duplicants, though it's pretty hard. You need to expose them quite heavily, though it can make them sick also, and you'll have to build Radbolts. For example, we'll get this duplicant here. We'll just say, why don't you stand up there for a second? And you can check here. You can see they've got absorbed rad dose, and you see that going up and up and up. Once they hit about 100 rads, they get sick, but they can dump off 60 rads a cycle by going to the bathroom. Every time they go to the bathroom, they lose 60 rads, 60 absorbed rads. Let's move them back down there. Here you go. So don't... yeah, they'll all even make that little animation every time they're exposed to rads. Don't expose them to too many rads, and try and keep them away from there unless you've got some... Anyway, with that out of the way, we need to go with diamond presses, interplanetary launchers, and Radbolt engines. All three of these take rads, and they're going to take them in amounts that will dwarf the amount you need in your study terminal. This here is the interplanetary launcher in its... well, okay, I won't say this is quite a natural environment. It turns out this thing works underwater, which was kind of a surprise. In fact, it doesn't even have an overheat temperature. In theory, you could probably just... you could run this under a lake of lava or magma. I don't think it would actually mine so much. This thing's pretty impressive so far. Anyway, it takes Radbolts to fire things, and you can see down here the launch cost. And the launch cost changes depending on what planet you launch it towards. If you click on change here, we can fire its payloads anywhere, but the moment we click on a place, say here, it determines how many Radbolts it actually costs. Oh wow, those things can actually hang a left and everything. Never mind, we're going to leave it on the home planet for now. However, to launch these things, it needs two things. One, a payload, and the second is rads. Now you can load this up with pretty much any material you want. You can put in conveyor loaders, or you can put in gas, or you can put in liquid. All it takes is once it has 200 kilos, or you can change the minimum payload here to whatever you would like. And oh, it's just launched there. Let's double check something here. This is very odd. You can launch them from underwater, and as well as that, behind resources. These things will fly straight through tiles. So as you can see there, it's just going right through those tiles. It has no problems. I don't know if this will probably be patched out in the future, I imagine. But then they go up to the top of the map, and then they fly off the screen. And if you go to the star map, we'll see here, they actually have launched. You can see them, well, the interplanetary payloads making their way over to here. It'll take a while, but they'll get there eventually. Now, next up, we're going to cover one side thing while we're here, and that is Radbolt reflectors. You'll notice here, this is a complete vacuum, and we have a Radbolt generator down here. It generates rads, fires them this direction. Those rads hit this fires them straight up, which hits this, and then it gets diagonally fired in here. Do not rotate this so that that end is up there. I tried doing that, and it immediately bounced. You have to actually get them one tile away from the corner so that it can go through this section. And we'll do this now in slow motion. We'll turn this on, turn it off, and you'll notice fires, comes straight up here, hits that, gets fired sideways, Then it will get fired into this, and then it comes all the way across and hits the sucker. And loads it up. Now, this is important. One, for this thing to ever launch, it needs 1 rad more than it's got in it, or 1 rad more than the destination. So in this case, it needs 61. As well as that, oh, damn it, we'll cover that in a minute. Once it starts launching, it can fire up to 5 shots, even if it only has enough for 1. It takes 60 rads for each shot, but for some reason there's still a bug in this at the moment where if it has 61 rads in it and it's ready to fire and it's fully loaded, as in has 1,000 kilos of mass in it, it will fire all 5. We'll demonstrate that in one moment. Right now we have fired it's got 62 Radbolts in it, and it's got over 1,000 kilos of mass, and now it's doing its cleaning animation. It cleans the rails once every 5 shots. Once the rails are finished cleaning, which will take about 30 seconds, it will then for some reason fire 5 shots in rapid succession, which will empty empty 1,000 kilos out of this device. Then once it's finished firing those kilos, it will, slip over and be done. But this means you can fire 1,000 kilos of mass from one planet to another just for the cost of 1 shot. I'm pretty sure this will be patched out. Yeah, there we go. It just fired 5 shots, and it only took 62 Radbolts to do that. And you'll see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All gone. Oh, wait, is it 6? Never mind. All of the shots have been fired. I don't know why this works this way. But if you wish to automate it, you can pretty much have it so that these things are fired over to another planet, and you can do it with one of these timer sensors. I'm going to set it to about 51 seconds, and we're going to let that be active. And then what happens is every time... Where is it? Yeah, we're going to hook that up now. Every time it hits that timer amount, it will fire off another mass. Oh, apologies, my timer was a bit off. This actually fires 6 shells. I have been miscounting this until I actually tested the numbers myself. Yeah, it turns out it fires 6 shells, which means you need to set the timer for 59 and 1. Alright, and when you do that... Oh, never mind, I've overfilled a little bit there. What should happen is you'll fire off 6 shots here, and it basically takes in 20 kilos. While the first 5 shots are firing, it takes in at least 20 kilos of material, which means it actually ends up firing 6. 1, 2... Let's see, there's 1, 2... 3, 4, 5, 6. So every 6 shots, this needs a cleaning. So with this set to a timer down here of, 1 second out of every 59, let's see if we've nailed this perfectly right. If we have, this should load back up again in a minute and fire off. So, after the testing, it turns out, yes, it should be 59 and 1, just to make sure you launch correctly. This is just the cheapest way of making sure you can run these interplanetary launchers. Now, I know this is probably still bugged where you're able to get 6 launches for the cost of 1, but honestly, right now, the only way you're going to be able to get enough launches right now and generate enough rads to do it is if you use this method. Otherwise, if you have to pay 60 Radbolts for every single shot, you need to imagine that's 200 kilos. So let me do some quick math. Yes, to keep this running at legit costs, it would cost you 3,600 Radbolts per cycle. Now, if we check down here, how much are we generating on this sucker? 683. Yeah, we wouldn't even be able to come close to running this flat out. And that would be, transferring, say, 1 full conveyor loader belt. Now, it would be less if it was. You don't need half as much as if you're transferring water, because water comes into 10 kilos per second. So if you want to transfer a whole resource belt, it does get a little bit expensive. Gas is much cheaper, it seems. However, to generate the Radbolts for this, we are using compressed nuclear waste. Now, I'm only going to touch on this because we're not covering the reactors this episode, and reactors are what generate your nuclear waste, and if you use some infinite liquid storage, you can compress this down and just generate so many rads. So this is 999 rads in that tile, and if we just leave it a minute because there's more rads radiation coming in, or more nuclear waste, you see it's going up to 1,000, and soon it'll go up to 1,001. This just allows you to keep compressing and compressing down more and more nuclear waste to generate more rads in a small area. I'll do a little bit more on that in a second, but this is just how you use interplanetary launchers. Load them up, fire the Radbolts into them, and let them fire off. They'll work from underwater, they're actually quite robust, and all we have to cover now is where they go on the other end. This here is the landing zone, and you have a targeting beacon. Now, my advice, only build 1. I haven't tried building 2, but I presume it was just going to confuse things. As well as that, you can build a landing beacon after they've been fired. So these shells appear to be self-guiding or something. Maybe maybe when they get to the planet to decide where they're going to go. But you can build this beacon after you've actually fired the shots. I've tested. Now, when these shells come down, what they'll do is they'll land either on the targeting beacon itself, 3 tiles to the left, or 2 tiles to the right. So basically, anywhere inside this area they can land. So they've got a 6 tiles radius they can land in. Just to note, because if you do have a gap on either side, they could fall down a hole or end up at the bottom of the map, and this can also be used to your advantage. This thing is actually not very power expensive. It's only 60 watts, so this is actually quite cheap to run. And at the same time, though, you do have these payload openers. They're required to open these interplanetary payloads. This is the only way to unpack them. They're made of genetic ooze, which means they have a melting point of 9,726.9 C, or, as everyone else calls it, the point where the game will crash if you heat something up that hot. So you're not opening these any other way but with the interplanetary loaders. You can't dump them in magma, you can't heat them up, you can't do it. Like, as far as I can tell, the only way to get them out is a payload opener, and it can't be automated. It takes a duplicate labor to do it. Sorry, that's just the way it is. And then the payload openers just have their own. They have liquid outputs, they have solid outputs, all of that stuff. This here is a nuclear waste stockpile we made earlier. This one has been running for, well, it's a 1800 cycle map, so say 1400 cycles maybe, and it generates an absolutely enormous amount of rads, working at 9,364 rads per cycle. This thing could run an interplanetary launcher all on its own, actually paying the legit costs. That's how powerful it is. We're using it, though, over on this side to run diamond presses. Why would you want to run a diamond press? Well, actually, first off, what does it do? It takes refined carbon and turns it into diamond. Well, it takes 100 kilos of refined carbon, 1,000 radbolts, and generates 100 kilos of diamond. Now, if you want to run one of these, you're pretty much stuck using one of these nuclear waste compressors, because it's the only way you're going to run any substantial amount of these for any period of time. Refined carbon is made from coal, so if you're running hatches, you can make a lot of this diamond, and the diamond is used for pretty much one thing only. And that reason is drill cones. Drill cones are these new mechanics that were introduced for mining remote asteroids. Well, asteroid clouds. You see these cloud fields like oily asteroids, radioactive asteroids, oxygen-rich fields. All of these require a drill bit to be mined. And that drill bit is ablated away. So the 1,000 kilos of diamond you put into your drill bit will be destroyed in the mining process. So what you're going to need to do is be able to produce more diamond. And to do that, you have your diamond presses. Now, you can, of course, mine some areas that will give you things that you can turn into diamond by eventually converting it into refined carbon. But honestly, you're going to have so much refined carbon on your home planet. I mean, let's see, I have how much diamond in this one here? 206 tons of diamond. And it's not like I've been skimping on using it. You can see that down here we have just oodles of diamond used for a heat spike. So yes, you can use these to generate enormous amounts of diamond. It will cost you an awful lot of nuclear waste. You're definitely going to be wanting to run a reactor, or you can do the Shinebug reactor we showed earlier. Though I would advise you, if you're running Shinebug reactors, maybe don't once they get too big. They will eat into your frames. Even if you keep the Shinebugs in one tile, eventually they're going to eat into your frames. You're better off just using some infinite liquid compression on some radioactive waste. As for running these diamond presses, the input port is along here, and that's above the heads of dupes. So dupes can work in this area. Just make sure they can't get into this area. And oh yeah, I did build that ladder just so that they could get up to that drill cone. Make sure that no dupes are going to be intersecting with the paths of the bolts. For example, over here, this is where the dupes, where we refuel the rockets. This is set up to a switch. You're going to want to use some automation on these things, because otherwise, if you're doing automatic refueling and your dupes come out, they'll get clocked in the head and take 20 hit points of damage. It can be rather painful. The Radbolt engines here, they use an awful lot of Radbolts, 4,800, so you're probably going to want to use your maximum amount of Radbolts. As well as that, the amount of radiation they give off in their exhaust is so huge you can use it to refuel the rockets themselves. As well as that, there is a feature in the game, bug, you can launch a rocket and then have it immediately land. It actually uses zero fuel. If you launch a rocket into orbit, there's a weird quirk in this game where this here is considered orbit of the planet, and it costs zero fuel to get there. It also takes zero fuel to land from there. So if you want, you can basically launch a rocket into space and then land it again, and the trail it gives off. In fact, let's just demonstrate it now. We have changed the orbit. We have changed the location to the orbit of the planet, and then we're just going to begin the launch sequence. It will take off, and you'll see it generates an awful amount of rads. And this rads also gets dumped into the waste we have below it. This was just some testing I did a long time ago. This allows you to fill this area up with a bunch of rads. Then you can stick one of these Radbolt generators in it and use it to self-fuel the rocket. Now, of course, if we check here on the star map, you'll see this rocket is now in space, but that's okay. We'll just tell it to land again. However, we're just going to make sure that the landing pad is, the Rad rocket landing pad. And then it should come straight back down again, landing right in the same spot. And you'll notice that it's used absolutely zero fuel in the entire process. And now we just have even more rads to work with. Yeah, this is a little bit broken, not gonna lie, a little bit broken. You can also use this with hydrogen rockets and other rockets to generate steam, all sorts of things, because it literally uses zero fuel on launch and landing. And if you're feeling particularly saucy, what you can do is you can just change this to orbit, and then you can just set this to toggle round-trip flights. And then, wait a minute. Oh, we do need to put in an automation wire, 1 second. There we go. Automation wire hooked up. Then we'll just set this to round trip. We'll set this to automation controlled, and come on, just launch immediately. It should immediately launch. It will go into space, land, and then launch again, and keep doing it infinitely. So yes, as you can see, little bit broken, easy way to generate lots and lots of rads, especially early on before you've got any decent amount of nuclear waste to go around. And that is what Radbolts are for. How you generate them, how you use them. Just start off with some Wheezeworts, later on switch to a Shinebug reactor if you want, or switch to the nuclear waste version if you're going to run a reactor. That should give you more than sufficient Radbolts to run things. However, do be aware if you do want to run an interplanetary launcher 24/7, it's usually quite expensive. Same with the Diamond Press. It's much cheaper to run the Radbolt engine because you'll be running it far less frequently. And do be aware this game is still being actively patched, so they might change a bunch of things, especially with that free rocket launch and landing. I can't see that sticking around forever. Also, the interplanetary launcher being able to launch from underwater and through solid objects, we'll see. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed and good luck.